She wasn't supposed to survive that night, but she did. And now she's come back to the place that tried to bury her sister alive. In the scorching summer of 1886, a woman steps off a train into a frontier town where secrets rot beneath the dust. She's using a dead woman's name. She's hunting a truth no one wants found. And the rancher waiting for her? He might be the only man who knows why her sister never left this cursed land alive. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels. The train wheezed to a stop like a dying animal, metal shrieking against metal, brakes grinding dust into the air until Alara couldn't see 3 feet in front of her face. She stood on the platform, if you could call 3 warped planks and a listing roof a platform, clutching a carpet bag that held everything she owned and several things she'd stolen. The town of Ashford Crossing wasn't much to look at. Hell, it wasn't much of anything. A collection of sun-bleached buildings slouched against each other like drunks after last call, paint peeling off in long strips that curled in the heat. The only sign of life was a dog sleeping in the shade of the general store, too hot to even twitch at flies. Alara adjusted the hat that kept sliding down her forehead, too big, borrowed from a woman in Denver who'd asked too many questions, and scanned the empty street. Somewhere in this godforsaken place was a man named Ronan Creed, a rancher. A widower, according to the letters. A man looking for a wife. She wasn't here to be anyone's wife. You Voss? The voice came from behind her, rough as gravel, and Alara spun around so fast she nearly lost her footing. The man standing there didn't look like he'd come to collect a bride. He looked like he'd come to collect a debt. Ronan Creed was tall, taller than any man had a right to be, with shoulders that stretched his shirt tight across the back and hands that looked like they could break a fence post in half. His face was all hard angles, jaw sharp enough to cut, eyes the color of winter sky. Not cold exactly, just empty, like he'd looked at too many things that didn't matter anymore. I asked you a question, he said. Alara straightened her spine, met his gaze without flinching. Alara Voss. Yes. He looked her over, head to toe, and she felt the assessment in it. Not the way men usually looked at women, not like that. This was different. He was measuring her the way you'd measure a horse before buying it, checking for weakness, flaws, whether she'd be worth the trouble. You're smaller than I expected, he said finally. You're ruder than I expected, Alara shot back. Something flickered across his face, surprise maybe, or the ghost of amusement, but it was gone before she could pin it down. He jerked his head toward a wagon waiting at the edge of the platform, pulled by 2 horses that looked about as thrilled to be there as she was. Get in. No welcome to Ashford Crossing? No, let me help you with your bag? You want pleasantries? You should have stayed in whatever city spit you out. He started walking toward the wagon without looking back. Get in or don't. I've got work to do either way. Alara stared at his retreating back, jaw tight. She could leave right now. Turn around, get back on that train, disappear into the next town and the one after that, until she was far enough away that no one would ever find her. But she'd come here for a reason, and that reason was buried somewhere on Ronan Creed's land. She grabbed her bag and followed. The ride to the ranch took an hour, and Ronan didn't say a single word the entire time. He drove the wagon like a man who'd done it 1,000 times, hands loose on the reins, eyes fixed on the horizon. Alara sat beside him, back straight, trying not to notice the way the heat pressed down on everything like a hand. The landscape was brutal in its emptiness. Flat scrubland stretched in every direction, broken only by the occasional stand of twisted trees that looked like they were trying to claw their way out of the earth. The sky was so big it felt like drowning. How long have you owned the ranch? Alara asked, mostly because the silence was starting to make her skin crawl. Long enough? That's not an answer. It's the one you're getting. She bit back a response, turned her attention back to the road. Fine. If you wanted to play the strong, silent type, she could work with that. Men like Ronan Creed, men who kept everything locked down tight, they always had something to hide. And people with secrets? They made mistakes. The ranch appeared in the distance like a mirage, shimmering in the heat haze. It was bigger than she'd expected, sprawling really, with a main house that looked like it had been added onto at random over the years. Barns and outbuildings scattered around like afterthoughts. Fences crisscrossed the property in uneven lines, and in the largest paddock, a black horse moved like liquid shadow. Alara sat up straighter, watching the animal. Even from a distance, she could see the raw power in the way it moved, muscles coiling and releasing under a coat so dark it seemed to swallow light. The horse wasn't just wild. It was something else. Furious, untouchable. "That's Nightlash," Ronan said, following her gaze. "He's the reason you're here." Alara turned to look at him. "I thought I was here to be your wife." "You're here to tame that horse." Ronan pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the main house, set the brake with a sharp yank. "If you can't do that, there's no point in you staying. You put that in a letter to a stranger, come out here and break a wild horse, or I won't marry you?" "Didn't put it in the letter at all." He climbed down from the wagon, finally looked at her directly. "But I'm telling you now. You ride Nightlash, prove you're not just some city girl looking for an easy life, and we'll talk about the rest." "You can't?" He shrugged. "Train leaves at dawn. You'll be on it." Alara stood up in the wagon, staring down at him. "That's the deal? That's what you're offering?" "That's what I'm offering. And if I say no?" "Then you say no." Ronan turned away, heading toward the house. "But I don't keep people who can't pull their weight. Ranch doesn't run on good intentions." Alara jumped down from the wagon, landed hard enough to send dust puffing up around her boots. "You're not what I expected either, Mr. Creed." He stopped, glanced back over his shoulder. "What were you expecting?" "Someone who wanted a wife, for starters, not a ranch hand with a pulse." "Maybe I don't want a wife," Ronan said. "Maybe I just need someone who can do what needs doing without asking stupid questions every 5 minutes. And maybe you're lying." The words hung in the air between them, sharp and dangerous. Ronan's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. A flicker of recognition or warning. "You think you know me?" he asked quietly. "I think you're testing me," Alara said. "I think you want to see what I'm made of before you decide whether to trust me. Which means you don't trust easy. Which means someone burned you." She took a step closer. "So here's what I think, Mr. Creed. I think you're the one who should be worried about whether I'll stay, not the other way around." For a long moment, Ronan just looked at her. Then he smiled, barely, just a twitch at the corner of his mouth, and it transformed his entire face, made him look younger, almost human. "We'll see," he said, and walked away. The main house was cooler inside, thick adobe walls keeping out the worst of the heat, but it wasn't welcoming. The furniture was sparse and functional: table, chairs, a stove in the corner that looked like it had seen better decades. Everything was clean, though, almost obsessively so. Not a dish out of place, not a speck of dust on the windowsill. A woman appeared from a back room, wiping her hands on an apron. She was older, maybe 60, with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that didn't miss much. "So you're the new one," the woman said, looking Alara up and down. "Lord, you're barely more than a girl." "I'm 23, Alara said, lifting her chin. "Like I said, a girl." But there was no malice in it, just observation. The woman stuck out a hand. "Name's Ruth. I keep the house, do the cooking, make sure these men don't kill themselves doing something stupid, which is a full-time job, let me tell you." Alara shook her hand. Ruth's grip was dry and strong, calloused from years of work. "Alara Voss. I know who you are. Whole ranch knows. You're all they've been talking about for a week." Ruth released her hand, gestured toward a narrow hallway. "Your room's back there. Second door on the left. It's not much, but it's got a bed and a window. That's more than some folks get." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. You might not make it through the night once you figure out what you've gotten yourself into." Ruth moved toward the stove, started pulling out ingredients with practiced efficiency. "Ronan tell you about the horse?" "He mentioned it." "That man." Ruth shook her head, started chopping vegetables with sharp, precise movements. "Nightlash came here 3 months ago, wild as they come. Ronan's been trying to break him ever since, and all he's got to show for it is bruises and a horse that hates everyone on 2 legs. Why does he want the horse tamed so badly?" Ruth paused mid-chop, glanced at Alara with something like pity. "Because that's what Ronan does. He finds broken things and tries to fix them. Doesn't matter if it's a horse, a fence, or a person. He thinks if he works hard enough, long enough, he can make everything right again." "Can he?" "No." Ruth went back to chopping. "But he hasn't figured that out yet. Alara wanted to ask more about Ronan, about the ranch, about what had happened here, but Ruth's expression had closed off, gone distant. Instead, Alara picked up her bag and headed down the hallway to her room. It was small, just like Ruth had said. A bed with a thin mattress, a dresser with 3 drawers, a washstand in the corner. The window looked out over the paddock, where Nightlash paced like a caged storm. Alara set her bag down and moved to the window. The horse was magnificent, even angry. Maybe especially angry. She'd seen animals like that before, creatures that had been hurt so badly they'd decided the only safe thing to do was hurt back first. She understood that. A knock on the doorframe made her turn. Ronan stood there, one shoulder against the wood, arms crossed. "You settling in?" "I just got here." "Good, because I want you to meet Nightlash. Properly." Alara raised an eyebrow. "Now. No time like the present." He pushed off the doorframe, started back down the hall. "Come on." She followed him outside, across the dusty yard to the paddock. Up close, Nightlash was even more impressive. Easily 17 hands, all muscle and fury, coat so black it gleamed blue in the sunlight. The horse watched them approach with eyes that missed nothing, ears pinned flat against his skull. "Beautiful, isn't he?" Ronan said, and there was something almost soft in his voice. Pride, maybe. Or hope. "He's terrified," Alara said. Ronan's head snapped toward her. "What?" "Look at him." She gestured at the horse. "The way he's holding himself, ears back, weight shifted, ready to bolt or fight. He's not angry. He's scared. He's wild. He's been hurt." Alara moved closer to the fence, slowly, keeping her movement small and deliberate. Nightlash's ears flicked forward, just slightly, listening. Something happened to him. Someone hurt him bad enough that he doesn't trust anyone anymore. So he fights. Because fighting is safer than trusting. Ronan stared at her, and she could feel the weight of that stare like a physical thing. "You can tell all that just by looking?" "I've seen it before." "In horses?" Alara didn't answer. She was watching Nightlash, and Nightlash was watching her, and in the space between them something passed. Recognition, maybe. Or understanding. "You want me to ride him?" she said quietly. "Break him. Make him behave." That was the deal. "I won't do it." Ronan's jaw tightened. "Then you're on the train tomorrow." "I didn't say I wouldn't tame him." Alara turned to face Ronan fully. "I said I wouldn't break him. There's a difference." "Enlighten me." "You break a horse, you destroy what makes him who he is. You teach him that fighting back gets him pain, that resistance is useless, that the only way to survive is to give up everything that matters." She looked back at Nightlash. "You tame him, you teach him that trust is possible, that he doesn't have to fight everyone, that being strong and being safe aren't mutually exclusive." Ronan was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "You think you can do that?" "I think I'm the only one here who can." He studied her, and Alara forced herself to hold still under that scrutiny. She needed him to believe her. Not because she cared about the horse, though she did, more than she'd expected, but because she needed time. Time to search. Time to find what her sister had left behind. "All right," Ronan said finally. "You've got 2 weeks. If Nightlash isn't tamed by then, you're gone." "Fair enough. And Alara?" He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes, close enough to smell leather and dust and something darker underneath. "Don't lie to me. I've been lied to enough for one lifetime. Whatever you're really doing here, whatever you're really looking for, I'll find out eventually. And when I do, I won't be forgiving about it." Alara's heart kicked hard against her ribs, but she didn't look away. "Is that a threat, Mr. Creed?" "It's a promise." He turned and walked away, boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. Alara watched him go, then looked back at Nightlash. The horse was still watching her, ears forward now, curious. "You and me both," she murmured. "We're both hiding from something, aren't we?" Nightlash snorted, tossed his head. Alara smiled despite herself. "Yeah, I thought so." That night, Alara couldn't sleep. The bed was too soft, or maybe too hard. She couldn't tell anymore. She'd spent the last 3 months sleeping in boarding houses and train cars, always moving, never staying long enough to leave an impression. This room, small as it was, felt too permanent, like it was trying to claim her. She got up, pulled on her dress, wrinkled now, dusty from the road, and slipped out into the hallway. The house was dark and quiet, everyone else asleep. She moved through the main room on silent feet, learned over years of practice how to walk without making a sound. Outside, the night air was cooler but still carried the day's heat, that dry, dusty warmth that settled into your bones. The moon was nearly full, bright enough to cast shadows, and in its light the ranch looked different, softer, almost peaceful. Alara walked toward the barn, drawn by instinct more than plan. The door was open. Someone had forgotten to latch it, or maybe they just didn't bother out here. And inside, the smell of hay and horse and old wood wrapped around her like a familiar coat. She found a ladder leading up to the loft and climbed it, muscles protesting after a day spent sitting in a wagon. The loft was full of hay bales stacked haphazardly, and through the gaps between the boards she could see down into the barn below. This was where she needed to start, not with the house, not with Ronan, with the places people forgot about, the spaces between. Alara started searching. She went through the loft methodically, checking behind bales, running her hands along the floorboards, looking for loose ones, examining every corner. Nothing. Just hay and dust and mouse droppings. She was about to give up when her fingers caught on something tucked between two bales in the far corner. Paper. Old, brittle, folded small. Alara pulled it out carefully, unfolded it in the moonlight coming through the gaps in the roof. It was a letter. No envelope, no address, just words written in a hand she recognized instantly because she'd spent years studying it, memorizing it, looking for it in every scrap of paper she could find. Her sister's handwriting. If you're reading this, I'm already gone. And you need to leave. Now. Before they... The letter ended there, torn off mid-sentence. The rest was missing. Alara's hands started to shake. She read it again, then again, as if the words might change or reveal something new. They didn't. What are you doing up here? Alara spun around so fast she nearly fell off the loft. Ronan stood at the top of the ladder, moonlight cutting across his face in harsh lines, expression unreadable. I couldn't sleep, she said, and it wasn't even a lie. She folded the letter quickly, shoved it into her pocket. I was just exploring. At midnight. Is there a law against it? Ronan climbed the rest of the way into the loft, and suddenly the space felt much smaller. He moved like a predator, all controlled power, and Alara's instinct screamed at her to run. She held her ground. Most people who come here at midnight are either stealing or hiding something, Ronan said. Which one are you? Maybe I'm just curious. About what, hey? About you. The words came out before she could stop them, and she saw surprise flicker across his face. Good. Keep him off balance. You brought me out here to tame a horse you couldn't tame yourself. You're testing me, judging me, looking for something. I want to know what. Ronan stepped closer, and Alara forced herself not to back away. He was so close now she could see the scar above his left eyebrow, the way his jaw worked like he was chewing on words he didn't want to say. You want to know what I'm looking for? He asked quietly. I'm looking for someone who won't run. Someone who'll stay when things get hard. Someone who... He stopped, jaw clenching. Everyone leaves. Eventually. I'm trying to figure out how long it'll take you. The honesty in it hit her like a fist. Alara stared at him, at this man who'd been nothing but walls and sharp edges since she'd arrived, and saw something underneath. Something raw and bleeding and trying desperately not to show. I'm not planning to leave, she said. Another truth hiding a lie. She'd leave the moment she found what she came for. But until then, everyone says that. Ronan turned away, started back toward the ladder. Get some sleep, Alara. You've got a long day tomorrow. He disappeared down the ladder, and a moment later she heard his boots crossing the barn floor, then silence. Alara waited until she was sure he was gone, then pulled out the letter again. Read it one more time in the moonlight. Before they what? Before they killed her? Before they found out? Before they came for Alara too? She folded the letter carefully, tucked it back into her pocket. Tomorrow she'd start with Nightlash, play the role Ronan expected. But tonight she'd found the first piece of the puzzle. Her sister had been here, had been hiding, had been running from something, And whatever it was, Alara was going to find it. Morning came too early and too bright, sunlight stabbing through the thin curtains like knives. Alara dragged herself out of bed, splashed water on her face from the washstand, and tried to remember the last time she'd slept more than 4 hours straight. Couldn't. Ruth had breakfast waiting, eggs, bacon, biscuits that were better than anything Alara had eaten in months. She sat at the table alone, the house empty and echoing around her. Through the window she could see ranch hands moving between buildings, starting their day. No sign of Ronan. "He's already been up 3 hours," Ruth said, appearing from the back room with a pot of coffee. "That man doesn't sleep. Don't think he knows how anymore." "What happened to him?" Alara asked before she could stop herself. "What made him like this?" Ruth poured coffee into Alara's cup, then her own, settled into a chair with a sigh. "That's not my story to tell, but I'll say this. Ronan Creed wasn't always the way he is now. Used to smile, used to laugh even. Then life took things from him, piece by piece, until there wasn't much left worth smiling about." "What kind of things?" "The kind you don't get back." Ruth sipped her coffee, stared out the window. "You seem like a smart girl, Alara, smarter than most who come through here. So I'm going to give you some advice, free of charge. Don't dig too deep into this place. Don't ask questions people don't want to answer, and don't go poking around in shadows you don't understand." Alara's spine went cold. "Why would you say that?" "Because I've seen what happens to people who do." Ruth met her eyes, and there was something in that gaze that looked like fear or memory. "This ranch has a way of swallowing secrets, and sometimes it swallows the people looking for them too." Before Alara could respond, the door banged open, and a man walked in. Young, maybe 25, with sandy hair and an easy grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Morning, Ruth." "Morning, miss." He tipped his hat at Alara. "You must be the new lady. Name's Jack. I help run the livestock." "Alara," she said, studying him. Something about Jack felt off, like a note played slightly wrong. He smiled too much, moved too carefully, watched too closely. "Ronan said you're going to tame Nightlash." Jack laughed, but it had an edge. "Good luck with that. Horse is mean as hell. Broke 2 of the boys' ribs last month just for getting near the fence." "Then maybe they shouldn't have gotten near the fence," Alara said. Jack's smile faltered. "Yeah, maybe." Ruth stood up, started clearing plates with more force than necessary. "Jack, don't you have work to do?" "Just came to grab some water, Ruth. Don't get your feathers ruffled." But he moved toward the door anyway, pausing to look back at Alara. "Seriously, though, be careful with that horse. We've lost enough people around here already." The door closed behind him, and Alara looked at Ruth. What did he mean by that? "Nothing. Jack talks too much, thinks too little." But Ruth wouldn't meet her eyes. Alara stood up, grabbed her hat. "I'm going to go see Nightlash." "Alara!" Ruth's voice stopped her at the door. "Whatever you came here looking for, is it worth dying for?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Alara thought about her sister, about the letter hidden in her room, about 3 years of searching and dead ends and nights spent wondering if she'd ever know the truth. "Yes," she said, and walked out into the burning morning sun. Nightlash was in the paddock, pacing the fence line like a prisoner measuring his cell. Up close in daylight, Alara could see the scars. Old ones, mostly healed, but visible under his coat if you knew where to look. Rope burns around his neck. What looked like whip marks across his hindquarters. Someone had hurt this animal, systematically and often. She approached the fence slowly, making sure the horse could see her coming. No sudden movements, no threats, just presence. "Hey there," she said softly. "Remember me?" Nightlash's ears flicked toward her voice, but he didn't stop pacing, didn't acknowledge her beyond that small movement. Alara sat down in the dust, back against the fence, and started humming. No particular song, just notes strung together in a melody her mother used to sing when Alara couldn't sleep. It had been years since she'd thought about her mother, longer since she'd let herself remember the before times, when the world was simpler and death was something that happened to other people. Minutes passed. Maybe an hour. The sun climbed higher, heat pressing down, sweat running down her back. Alara kept humming, kept still, kept being nothing more than a presence at the edge of Nightlash's awareness. Finally, the horse stopped pacing, turned to look at her directly. They stared at each other across 20 feet of dust and hurt and history. Neither of them could change. "I know," Alara said quietly. "I know what they did to you. I know why you don't trust anyone. But I'm not here to hurt you. I'm just here to sit. That's all. Just sit and breathe and exist in the same space." Nightlash snorted, tossed his head. But he didn't move away. Progress. Alara stayed there until the sun was directly overhead, until Ruth came out and called her in for lunch, until her legs had gone numb from sitting. When she finally stood up, muscles screaming, Nightlash was only 10 feet from the fence, watching her. "Tomorrow," she told him. "We'll try again tomorrow." She turned to leave and nearly walked straight into Ronan. He was standing behind her, had been for who knows how long, arms crossed, an expression unreadable as ever. "You've been sitting there for 3 hours," he said. "I know." "You didn't even try to approach him." "I know that too." Ronan studied her, and Alara could feel him trying to figure her out, trying to understand what kind of game she was playing. Good luck, she thought. She wasn't even sure herself anymore. "Most people would have given up by now," he said finally. "I'm not most people." "No." Something that might have been respect flickered across his face. "No, you're not." He walked away and Alara watched him go, wondering what exactly she'd just seen in his eyes. Approval? Suspicion? Both? She was so focused on Ronan that she almost missed it. A flash of movement near the barn, someone ducking out of sight. She turned her head sharply, but whoever it was had disappeared. Someone was watching her, and they didn't want to be seen. Alara's hand drifted to the pocket where she'd hidden her sister's letter. Whatever was happening here, whatever had killed her sister, it was still alive, still active, still dangerous. And she'd just put herself right in the middle of it. That afternoon, Alara helped Ruth with the washing, sheets and shirts and towels that needed to be scrubbed clean and hung out to dry in the merciless sun. It was mindless work, the kind that let her think while her hands stayed busy. "How many people work on the ranch?" she asked, wringing out a shirt with more force than necessary. "Including Ronan? About 12. Ruth hauled another basket of wet laundry toward the clothesline. "Used to be more, but people leave, always leaving." "Why?" Ruth shot her a look. "You ask a lot of questions." "I'm curious." Curiosity isn't always rewarded around here. But Ruth sighed, started hanging shirts with practiced efficiency. "Some leave because the work's too hard. Some because Ronan's too difficult. Some because—" She stopped, mouth pressing into a thin line. "Because what?" "Because strange things happen on this land, Alara. Things people don't like to talk about. Animals going missing. Sounds at night that don't make sense. Tools that move when no one's touching them. Most folks, they tell themselves it's just the wind or wild animals or their imagination. But some decide it's not worth sticking around to find out." Alara's pulse quickened. "Has anyone ever gotten hurt?" Ruth's hands stilled on the clothesline. When she spoke, her voice was so quiet, Alara almost couldn't hear it. "There was a girl, few years back. She worked in the kitchen, helped me keep the house. Sweet thing, curious, like you. Asked too many questions, went places she shouldn't have gone. What happened to her?" "They found her in the old paddock, the one we don't use anymore. Said it was an accident, said she must have fallen, hit her head." Ruth's hand started moving again, jerky and too fast. "But I saw her body before they took it away. That wasn't from a fall. That was from something else." Alara's blood turned to ice. "What was her name?" "Sarah." Ruth hung the last shirt, turned to look at Alara with eyes that had seen too much. "Sarah Voss. Just like you." The world tilted. Alara grabbed the clothesline to steady herself, heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. Sarah, her sister. They'd found her sister. Did you know her?" Alara managed to ask. "Not well. She kept to herself mostly, but she was kind, gentle. Didn't deserve what happened to her." Ruth's gaze sharpened. "Why? You got some connection to her?" Alara forced herself to breathe, to think, to lie. "No, same last name made me wonder if we were related somehow." Ruth didn't look convinced, but she nodded slowly. "Maybe you were. Maybe that's why—" She stopped herself, shook her head. Never mind, I'm just an old woman who's been out in the sun too long. Come on, there's more washing to do. But Alara couldn't move, couldn't think past the roaring in her ears. Her sister had died here, on this ranch, in that paddock, and they'd called it an accident. She needed to see it, needed to see where Sarah had died, what she'd been looking for, what had killed her. But she couldn't do it now, not with Ruth watching, not in broad daylight where anyone could see. Tonight, then, after everyone was asleep, after the ranch went quiet and the shadows grew long enough to hide in. Tonight, she'd find the truth, or die trying. The rest of that day crawled by like something wounded. Alara went through the motions, helped Ruth finish the washing, ate dinner she couldn't taste, made small talk with ranch hands whose faces blurred together into a single mass of suspicion and curiosity. All the while, her mind kept circling back to one thing: the old paddock, Sarah's body, the lie they'd told about how she died. By the time the sun finally dropped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of blood and bruise, Ilara's nerves were stretched so tight she thought they might snap. She forced herself to wait, to be patient, to let the ranch settle into its nighttime rhythms before she moved. Ruth retired early, muttering something about her back. The ranch hands drifted off to the bunkhouse, their laughter and rough voices fading into the distance. Ronan disappeared into his study, a small room off the main house that he kept locked, always, and didn't come out. Alara lay in her bed fully clothed, watching moonlight crawl across the ceiling, counting her heartbeats until enough time had passed. Midnight came and went. 1 in the morning. 2. Finally, she couldn't stand it anymore. She slipped out of her room, moved through the dark house on silent feet. The front door didn't creak. She'd oiled the hinges that afternoon while Ruth wasn't looking, and then she was outside, alone in the night air that had finally cooled to something almost comfortable. The old paddock was on the far side of the property, past the barn and the working corrals, tucked against a stand of dead trees that looked like skeletal fingers clawing at the sky. No one had mentioned it since Ruth slipped that afternoon, but Alara had seen it from her window, had watched the way people avoided it, the wide berth they gave it even when it meant taking the long way around. She made her way there slowly, every shadow a potential threat, every sound making her freeze and hold her breath. But the ranch stayed quiet, sleeping, unaware. The old paddock fence was falling apart, posts leaning at drunken angles, rails split and rotting. Inside, the ground was bare dirt, packed hard by years of hooves and weather. In the moonlight, it looked like a grave. Alara ducked between the rails, stepped into the space where her sister had died. The air felt different here, heavier maybe, or just wrong in a way she couldn't name. She started searching, not sure what she was looking for. Blood would have washed away years ago. Evidence would have been cleaned up, hidden, destroyed. But Sarah had been smart. She wouldn't have left something obvious. She would have hidden it where only someone who knew her, really knew her, would think to look. Alara walked the perimeter of the paddock, running her hands along the fence posts, checking for loose boards or hollowed sections. Nothing. She examined the ground, looking for disturbed dirt or anything buried. Still nothing. She was about to give up when she noticed it. One of the corner posts had a knot in the wood, about chest height, that looked different from the others. Darker. Newer. Alara dug her fingernails into the knot and pulled. It came free with a soft pop, revealing a hollow space inside the post. And inside that hollow space, wrapped in oilcloth, was a small bundle. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped it. She unwrapped the oilcloth carefully, breath caught in her throat. Inside was a ledger. Small, leather-bound, pages yellowed with age and use. Alara opened it to the first page and felt her blood turn cold. It was a record. Names, dates, amounts of money. Dozens of entries, maybe hundreds, going back years. And next to each entry, a single word. Discretion, silence, compliance, departure. Payments. These were payments to keep people quiet, to make them leave, to buy their cooperation. Alara flipped through the pages, scanning the entries. Most of the names she didn't recognize, but some she did. Ranch hands Ruth had mentioned, a woman who'd worked in the kitchen before Sarah. And there, near the end, in her sister's handwriting, Sarah Voss. $500. Discretion. Her sister had been paid to keep quiet about something. And when that hadn't worked, when Sarah had decided to dig deeper instead of taking the money and running, they'd killed her for it. Alara's hands clenched on the ledger, rage and grief warring in her chest. She'd known Sarah was dead, had spent 3 years accepting that truth, but seeing it written down like this, seeing her sister reduced to a line item in someone's accounting of lies, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "You shouldn't be here." The voice came from behind her, quiet and cold, and Alara spun around so fast she nearly fell. Jack stood at the edge of the paddock, backlit by moonlight, face in shadow. But she could hear the threat in his voice clear as day. "I was just," she started. "I know what you were doing." Jack moved closer, and now she could see his expression. No easy grin, no charm, just calculation. "Question is, what are you going to do about what you found?" Alara's mind raced. She could run, but he was between her and the only exit. She could scream, but by the time anyone came, if anyone came, it would be too late. She could fight, but Jack was bigger, stronger, and she'd seen the way he moved. He knew how to handle himself. "Nothing," she said, forcing her voice steady. "I'm not going to do anything." "Liar." Jack took another step forward. "You're Sarah's sister, aren't you? That's why you came here. That's why you're poking around where you don't belong." There was no point in denying it. "Yes. Thought so. You look like her. Same eyes, same stubborn mouth." Jack shook his head, almost sad. "She should have taken the money and left. We gave her a chance, more than one chance. But she kept digging, kept asking questions, kept trying to find proof." "Proof of what?" Alara demanded. "What was she looking for? What did you people do?" "Nothing you need to worry about." Jack's hand moved to his belt, and Alara saw the knife there. Not big, but big enough, sharp enough. "You're going to give me that ledger. Then you're going to get on tomorrow's train and forget you ever heard of Ashford Crossing. Or you're going to end up just like your sister. Your choice." Alara clutched the ledger tighter. Everything Sarah had died for was in these pages. All the proof, all the truth, all the answers Alara had been searching for. She couldn't just hand it over. "No," she said. Jack's expression didn't change. "That's what Sarah said too, right before you killed her." "I didn't kill anyone." But there was something in his voice, a hesitation, a crack in the certainty. "I'm just cleaning up messes, making sure things stay quiet. That's all I've ever done." "Who do you work for?" Alara asked, mind racing, trying to buy time. "Who's paying you to keep people quiet?" "Someone who doesn't like loose ends." Jack pulled the knife free, let it catch the moonlight. "Last chance, girl. Give me the ledger." Alara's options were limited and getting smaller by the second. She could throw the ledger at him, try to use the distraction to run. She could try to fight, hope she got lucky. Or she could do what Sarah would have done, what Sarah had always done when backed into a corner. She could burn it all down. "You want the ledger?" Alara held it up, dangling it between two fingers. "Come and get it." She turned and ran, not toward the paddock entrance where Jack stood, but toward the back corner where the fence was most rotten. She hit it at full speed, shoulder first, and felt the wood give way with a crack that seemed to echo across the entire ranch. Then she was through, stumbling into the scrubland beyond, ledger clutched to her chest, Jack's cursing following her into the darkness. She ran blind, feet finding purchase on instinct alone, branches whipping at her face and arms. Behind her, she could hear Jack crashing through the brush, closer than she wanted him to be. Alara's lungs burned, legs screaming in protest. But she didn't slow down. Couldn't slow down. If Jack caught her out here, no one would hear her scream. No one would find her body until it was too late. A hand grabbed her arm, yanked hard, and Alara went down, hitting the ground with enough force to knock the breath from her lungs. Jack loomed over her, knife gleaming. "Should have taken the deal," he panted. "Should have—" The gunshot split the night like thunder. Jack jerked, stumbled backward, hand going to his shoulder where blood was already spreading dark across his shirt. He stared at it, confused, then looked up. Ronan stood 20 feet away, rifle still raised, expression carved from stone. "Get away from her." "Ronan, this isn't—" She was— Jack stumbled over his words, over his feet, backing away with his hands raised. "You don't understand." "I understand plenty." Ronan's voice was quiet, deadly. "I understand you were about to hurt someone on my property. I understand you've got a knife and she doesn't. I understand if you're not gone in the next 10 seconds, The next shot goes between your eyes. Jack looked between Ronan and Alara, calculation flickering across his face. Then he turned and ran, disappearing into the scrubland with the grace of someone who knew this land too well. Ronan lowered the rifle, crossed to Alara in 3 long strides. "Are you hurt?" "No." She let him pull her to her feet, legs shaking so badly she could barely stand. I'm fine." "What the hell were you doing out here?" Ronan demanded, and there was anger in his voice now, hot and real. "Do you have any idea how dangerous—" "I found this." Alara held up the ledger, hands still trembling. "In the old paddock. Sarah hid it there before she died." Ronan went very still. In the moonlight, his face looked carved from marble. "Sarah? My sister." The truth spilled out before Alara could stop it, exhaustion and fear and grief stripping away all her careful lies. "Sarah Voss was my sister. She worked here 3 years ago, and someone on this ranch killed her." For a long moment, Ronan didn't say anything. He just stared at her, and Alara couldn't read his expression, couldn't tell if he was angry or shocked or something else entirely. Then he took the ledger from her hands, flipped through the pages with quick, efficient movements. His jaw tightened with each entry he read. "We need to get back to the house," he said finally. "Now." "Ronan, now, Alara." He grabbed her arm, not rough, but firm enough that she knew arguing would be pointless, and started pulling her back toward the ranch. "We'll talk there, where it's safe." "Nowhere on this ranch is safe," Alara shot back. But she let him lead her anyway, because her legs were still shaking and her heart was still racing, and she didn't think she could find her way back alone. They made it to the house in tense silence. Ronan ushered her inside, locked the door behind them, and immediately went to the windows to check the latches. Only when he was satisfied they were secure did he turn back to her. "Sit," he ordered, pointing at the table. Alara sat. Ronan placed the ledger between them, lit a lamp, and started reading through it properly. She watched his face change as he absorbed what was written there, shock giving way to anger, anger giving way to something darker. "How long have you known?" he asked without looking up. "Known what?" "That your sister died here, that you came to find out why." Now he did look at her, and his eyes were hard. "How long have you been lying to me?" Alara lifted her chin. "Since the moment I stepped off that train." "And the horse? Was that all part of the act too?" "No." That at least was true. "I meant what I said about Nightlash, about taming him instead of breaking him. That was real." Ronan laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Real, right, because you've been so honest about everything else." "I never claimed to be honest. You never asked for honesty. You asked for someone who could tame a horse and not run when things got hard." Alara leaned forward, meeting his gaze without flinching. "And I haven't run. Even when Jack was about to kill me, even when I found out my sister was murdered on your land, I didn't run. Jack wasn't going to kill you. He had a knife to my throat, and I stopped him." Ronan's voice dropped, went quiet and dangerous. "I've been watching you since you got here, Alara. Watching you sneak around at night, watching you search places you shouldn't be searching, watching you lie to Ruth and the hands and me. I knew you were looking for something. I just didn't know what until now." Alara's blood went cold. "You knew?" "I'm not stupid. Woman shows up out of nowhere, claims she wants to be a rancher's wife, but acts like she's hunting ghosts. Of course I knew." He slammed his hand down on the ledger. "But I didn't know about this. Didn't know someone was paying people off, keeping them quiet, making them disappear. Didn't know—" His voice cracked just slightly. "I didn't know about your sister." "How could you not know? She worked here. She died here. They found her body in your paddock." "I was gone." Ronan rubbed a hand over his face, suddenly looking older, more tired. 3 years ago, I was in Denver for 2 months dealing with a land dispute. When I came back, Ruth told me there'd been an accident. A girl had fallen, hit her head, died before anyone could help her. I had no reason not to believe it. Someone lied to you. Someone's been lying to me about a lot of things, apparently." He opened the ledger again, started reading names aloud. "Marcus Webb. He left 6 months ago, said his mother was sick. Elena Martinez. Quit last year, claimed she got a better offer in California. Thomas Reed." He stopped, jaw clenching. Thomas said he was going back east. I gave him a reference letter, helped him pack his bags. They all took money, Ilara said quietly. They all saw something or knew something, and someone paid them to keep quiet and leave. Who? Ronan demanded. Who has access to this kind of money? Who's been running this operation right under my nose? Ilara flipped to the last few pages of the ledger, where the handwriting changed. The earlier entries were in a neat, controlled script, but the recent ones, the ones from the last year, were different, looser, more familiar. She pointed to a signature at the bottom of several entries. Do you recognize this? Ronan leaned closer, eyes narrowing. Then his face went white. No, that's not possible. Who is it? Harlan Pike. He said the name like it hurt. My business partner, the man who handles the ranch's finances while I manage the land and livestock. He's been with me for 15 years. Ronan stopped, staring at the signature like it might change if he looked long enough. He wouldn't do this. The evidence says otherwise. The evidence is in a book hidden in a fence post, written by a dead woman and carried around by her lying sister. Ronan's voice had gone flat, defensive. For all I know, you forged this. For all I know, this is some kind of scheme to what? Get money? Destroy my reputation? Ilara stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. My sister is dead. She came here looking for work, found out something she shouldn't have found out, and they killed her for it. I don't care about your money or your reputation. I care about the truth. Then why didn't you just tell me from the start? Ronan stood too, and they faced each other across the table like duelists. Why the lies? Why the games? Because I didn't know if I could trust you. The words came out louder than she meant them to, raw and honest. For all I knew, you were the one who killed her. You were the one paying people off. You were the reason she's dead. I didn't even know her. And I didn't know that. Lara's hands were shaking again, but this time it was anger, not fear. All I knew was that my sister came to this ranch and never left. That they found her body and called it an accident. That no one investigated, no one asked questions, no one cared that a 21-year-old girl was dead. So yes, I lied. Yes, I used a fake name and a fake story to get close enough to find out what really happened. Because that's what you do when the people who are supposed to protect you don't. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Ronan stared at her, something shifting behind his eyes. Anger fading into understanding into something that looked almost like regret. Your name isn't Ilara Voss, he said finally. No. What is it? Does it matter? It does to me. She hesitated, then gave him the truth. The first real truth she'd given anyone in 3 years. Ilara Thorne. Sarah was my half-sister. We had different fathers, same mother. She left home when I was 15, came west to find work. We wrote letters for a while, but then they stopped. I spent 2 years trying to find out what happened to her. When I finally tracked her here, I found out she was dead. And I decided, her voice broke. I decided I was going to find out why, no matter what it took. Ronan absorbed this, jaw working like he was chewing through something tough. Then he picked up the ledger, tucked it under his arm. We're going to see Harlan. Now. It's 3 a.m. I don't care. He grabbed his rifle, checked that it was loaded. If he's behind this, I want answers, and I want them before he has a chance to run. Ilara followed him out into the night, heart pounding for entirely different reasons now. They were doing this, actually doing this, confronting the man who might have killed her sister. Harlan Pike lived in a small house on the eastern edge of the property, close enough to the main ranch to be convenient, but far enough away to have privacy. Lights were on inside. Someone was awake. Ronan didn't bother knocking. He kicked the door open, rifle raised, and Ilara followed him into chaos. The house was in shambles. Furniture overturned, papers scattered everywhere, drawers pulled out and emptied onto the floor. And in the middle of it all, Harlan Pike stood with a traveling bag in one hand and a pistol in the other. He was older than Ilara expected, maybe 60, with gray hair and a face that had probably been handsome once but was now just tired. He looked up when they burst in, and something crossed his expression. Not surprise. Resignation. Ronan, he said quietly, I was wondering when you'd figure it out. Figure what out? Ronan's voice was deadly calm. That you've been stealing from me? Paying people to keep quiet? Covering up a murder on my land? I didn't murder anyone. Harlan lowered the pistol, set it on the table. I cleaned up messes, that's all. Kept things running smooth. By paying off witnesses? Alara stepped forward, holding up the ledger. By making sure no one talked about what they saw? Harlan looked at her properly for the first time, and recognition flickered in his eyes. You're Sarah's sister. I thought you might come eventually. You look just like her. What did she see? Alara demanded. What was she trying to expose? Everything. Harlan sank into a chair, suddenly looking every one of his 60 years. She saw everything. The deals, the bribes, the way we were running this ranch into the ground while telling you, he looked at Ronan, while telling you everything was fine, that we were making money, that the books balanced. They don't balance? They haven't balanced in 5 years. Harlan laughed, bitter and broken. We're hemorrhaging money, Ronan. Have been since the drought hit, since we lost half the herd to disease, since the market crashed and beef prices dropped through the floor. I tried to tell you, tried to make you see, but you were so focused on keeping this place running, on maintaining your father's legacy, that you wouldn't listen. So I did what I had to do. By stealing? By keeping us afloat? Harlan's voice rose desperate. I took out loans in your name, made deals with investors who wanted a piece of the ranch, paid off inspectors who would have shut us down for violations, bribed officials who were asking too many questions about our water rights. Every penny that went out of our accounts was keeping this place alive. Ronan's face had gone pale. Who knows about this? Everyone who took money and left. Everyone whose name is in that book. Harlan gestured at the ledger. Sarah figured it out. She was helping me with the bookkeeping, smart girl, too smart. And she started noticing the discrepancies, started asking questions. I offered her money to keep quiet, $500, more than she'd make in a year. She took it. He looked at Alara. She took it, and then she kept digging anyway. So you killed her? Alara's voice shook with fury. I didn't kill her. Harlan stood up, hands raised. I swear, I didn't. When she wouldn't stop, when she said she was going to report everything to the territorial marshal, I told her she needed to leave, told her to take the money and go. She agreed. She was packing her bags that night. Then how did she end up dead in the old paddock? Harlan's face crumpled. I don't know. I swear, I don't know. One of the hands found her there the next morning. I thought maybe she'd gone out there to think, or to look for more evidence, and she'd fallen. Hit her head. It was an accident. Liar. Alara moved closer, hands clenched into fists. She wouldn't have gone out there alone at night. She was smarter than that. Then maybe she wasn't alone. The words came from the doorway, and they all turned to see Jack standing there, shoulder bandaged, gun in hand. Maybe someone followed her, made sure she didn't make it to the marshal. Ronan swung the rifle around, but Jack was faster. The gunshot was deafening in the small space, and Alara watched Ronan's rifle clatter to the floor, a hole punched clean through the barrel. Nobody move, Jack said calmly, or the next shot goes somewhere softer. Alara's ears rang from the gunshot, but her mind was already calculating distances, angles, ways out of this room that didn't end with a bullet in her spine. Jack stood in the doorway like he owned the place, gun steady, eyes cold in a way they'd never been before. The easy grin was gone. Whatever mask he'd been wearing had finally slipped. You killed her, Alara said, voice flat. Not a question, a fact. Jack shrugged, the gesture almost casual. She was going to ruin everything. Couldn't let that happen. She was 21 years old. The words came out strangled, thick with rage Alara could barely contain. She was trying to do the right thing. The right thing, Jack laughed, short and bitter. You know what the right thing gets you out here? Dead. Your sister learned that lesson. Looks like you're about to learn it too. Ronan shifted his weight, and Jack's gun swung toward him immediately. Don't even think about it, boss. I know you're fast, but I'm faster, and I really don't want to shoot you, but I will if you make me. Why? Ronan's voice was rough, hurt beneath the anger. I trusted you. Gave you a job when no one else would. Paid you fair wages. Treated you like family. Family. Jack spat the word like poison. You treated me like a hired hand, like someone who should be grateful for scraps from your table. You have any idea what it's like watching you play Lord of the Manor while the rest of us break our backs keeping this place running? While Harlan here bleeds it dry and you don't even notice? I didn't know. Because you didn't want to know. Jack's composure cracked just slightly. You were too busy mourning your dead wife. Too busy feeling sorry for yourself. Too busy trying to prove you could run this ranch the way your daddy did. Well, guess what? You can't. This place has been dying for years and you've been too blind to see it. Harlan made a small sound, something between a sob and a laugh. Jack, please, this doesn't have to. We can still fix this. We can. Shut up. Jack didn't even look at him. You're the one who got us into this mess. If you just handled Sarah properly, if you'd made sure she actually left instead of letting her wander around that paddock at night, none of this would have happened. I told you to scare her, Harlan said, voice shaking. I told you to make her understand she needed to go. I never told you to kill her. You didn't have to tell me anything. I saw the way she was looking at those books, the questions she was asking. She wasn't going to stop, so I stopped her. Jack's eyes slid to Alara. Should have made sure there wasn't a sister. That was my mistake. Won't make it twice. Alara's hand moved toward her pocket, where she'd tucked Sarah's letter, but Jack caught the motion. Hands where I can see them, all of you. They raised their hands slowly. Alara's mind raced, trying to find a way out, a solution, anything that didn't end with 3 more bodies in that old paddock. But Jack had the only working gun in the room, and he was too far away to rush, too alert to surprise. Here's what's going to happen, Jack said, voice taking on a reasonable tone that was somehow worse than the anger. Harlan's going to finish packing that bag. Then we're all going to take a walk out to the old paddock, where there's going to be a terrible accident. A tragic confrontation between a grieving sister, a desperate embezzler, and a rancher trying to stop them both. A lot of blood, a lot of confusion. By the time anyone finds you, I'll be 3 states away with enough of Harlan's money to start over somewhere nice. They'll know it was you, Ronan said. Ruth saw you earlier, saw you bleeding. They'll put it together. Ruth's an old woman who sleeps like the dead. And even if she wakes up, even if she asks questions, who's she going to tell? The marshal? The same marshal Harlan's been bribing for 5 years? Jack smiled, cold and certain. No one's coming to save you. No one even knows you're here. That's when Alara heard it, a sound so faint she almost missed it beneath the pounding of her own heart. A creak. A footstep. Someone else was in the house. Jack heard it too. His eyes flicked toward the back room, just for a second, attention splitting. Alara moved. She grabbed the oil lamp off the table and threw it at Jack's head in one smooth motion. He ducked, reflexes good enough to avoid the direct hit, but the lamp shattered against the doorframe behind him, oil spraying across the wood, glass raining down. In that moment of distraction, Ronan lunged forward, tackling Jack around the waist. They went down hard, the gun flying from Jack's hand and skittering across the floor toward Alara. She dove for it, fingers closing around cold metal just as Jack threw Ronan off and scrambled to his feet. He saw her with the gun and froze. Don't move, Alara said, hand shaking so badly the barrel wavered in the air. She'd never fired a gun in her life, never even held one, but Jack didn't need to know that. You won't shoot me. Jack took a step forward. You're not a killer. Neither was my sister, but you killed her anyway. Alara's finger found the trigger, and she realized with a strange clarity that she could do it, could pull that trigger and watch Jack fall and feel nothing but relief. The knowledge terrified her almost as much as it steadied her hands. Jack saw it too, saw the shift in her eyes, the way her grip tightened. He stopped moving. On the floor, Alara ordered. Hands behind your head. Now. For a moment she thought he might refuse, might call her bluff. Then he slowly, carefully lowered himself to his knees, laced his fingers behind his head. Ronan was already moving, grabbing rope from Harlan's scattered supplies, binding Jack's wrists with quick, efficient knots. Where'd you learn to throw like that? Saloon work. Alara kept the gun trained on Jack, not trusting him for a second. You pick up skills when men get handsy. Remind me never to make you angry. A figure appeared in the doorway to the back room, and Alara swung the gun toward them before recognition kicked in. Ruth stood there in her nightdress, a rolling pin clutched in both hands like a weapon, eyes wide with shock. What in the name of... what is happening here? Ruth's gaze swept across the scene, taking in Jack bound on the floor, Harlan slumped in his chair, Ronan bleeding from a split lip, and Alara holding a gun with hands that were finally starting to shake. Someone better start explaining right now. Jack killed Sarah Voss, Alara said, and saying it out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. All this time she'd been chasing a ghost, hunting for truth in shadows and whispers. Now she had it. Had him. The man who'd murdered her sister was tied up at her feet. 3 years ago, he killed her and made it look like an accident. Ruth's face went white. The rolling pin slipped from her fingers, hit the floor with a dull thud. No. Jack, you couldn't. I did what had to be done, Jack said, no remorse in his voice. Sarah was going to destroy everything. The ranch, the jobs, all of it. I saved this place. By murdering a girl? Ruth's voice rose to a shout. By killing someone who worked in my kitchen, who I fed and sheltered and treated like... She couldn't finish the sentence, just stood there, tears streaming down her weathered face. Harlan finally spoke up, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know. I swear, Ruth, I didn't know what he was going to do. I just wanted her to leave. But you paid him. Alara turned the gun on Harlan now, and he shrank back into his chair. You paid him to scare her, to make her go away. That makes you just as guilty. I never wanted anyone to die. I was just trying to save the ranch, to keep Ronan from losing everything his father built. By running it into the ground? Ronan's voice was ice. By taking out loans in my name, making deals with criminals, bribing officials? You call that saving the ranch? I call it survival. Harlan met his eyes, something like defiance flickering there. You want to know the truth, Ronan? The whole truth? Your father left you a legacy built on sand. This ranch was failing long before you inherited it. All those stories he told about making his fortune fair and square? Lies. He bought this land with money stolen from a mining company, paid off the territorial governor to look the other way when he diverted water from public sources, built his empire on bribes and backroom deals and blood. I was just following his example. The silence that followed was absolute. Ronan looked like he'd been punched, all the air gone from his lungs, face slack with shock. My father, he started, then stopped. Tried again. My father was an honest man. Your father was a crook. Harlan's voice was almost gentle now, pitying. And a good one. He knew how to play the game, knew when to push and when to pull back, knew how to keep people quiet. I learned everything from him. The only difference is I wasn't as good at it. I made mistakes, let things get messy, let people like Sarah see too much. Ronan turned away, hand going to his face like he could physically block out the words. Alara wanted to say something, offer some kind of comfort, but what could she possibly say? Your whole life is a lie? The man you worshipped was a criminal? Sometimes the truth didn't comfort. Sometimes it just destroyed. Ruth broke the silence. We need to get the marshal, now, before... She glanced at Jack. Before anything else happens. The marshal's been on Harlan's payroll for years, Alara said. We can't trust him. Then we go higher. Territorial marshal in Denver. Or we ride to the next town, find someone who isn't compromised. Ruth's voice steadied, old strength reasserting itself. But we're not handling this ourselves. Too many people have died on this land already. We're doing this right. Ronan nodded slowly, still looking like he'd taken a beating. Ruth's right. We take them both. He gestured at Jack and Harlan. Into Ashford Crossing at first light. Put them in the jail there until we can get word to Denver. The jail? Jack laughed, harsh and mocking. That cell hasn't held anyone in 10 years. Locks rusted through. You really think you can keep me there? I think if you try to escape, I'll put a bullet in your leg and drag you to Denver myself, Ronan said quietly. So yeah, I think we can keep you there. Jack's smile faded. He looked at Alara, at the gun still trained on him, and something shifted in his expression. Calculation, planning. He was already thinking about ways out, strategies for escape. We should tie up Harlan too, Alara said. He's part of this. I'm not going to run. Harlan stood up slowly, hands raised. I'll come quietly, face whatever punishment comes. I'm too old and too tired to keep running from this. That's supposed to make me feel sorry for you? Alara's voice was sharp enough to cut. You helped cover up my sister's murder. You paid people to keep quiet. You destroyed evidence. I know what I did. Harlan looked at her fully, and there was genuine regret in his eyes. It didn't make her hate him any less. I know I can't fix it, can't bring Sarah back, can't undo any of the harm I've caused, but I can at least tell the truth, all of it, every name, every payment, every deal, if that's worth anything. It wasn't, not really, but it was better than nothing. Ronan found more rope, bound Harlan's hands as well. Then they all stood there in the wrecked house, no one quite sure what came next. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind exhaustion and shock and the slow, creeping realization of what had almost happened. We should wait here, Ruth said finally. Until dawn, then we take them into town. That's 3 hours away, Alara said. 3 hours where Jack could what? Escape while tied up with 3 people watching him? Ruth's voice was firm. We're not dragging prisoners through the dark, Alara. That's how people get killed. She was right. Alara knew she was right. But the thought of sitting in this room with Sarah's killer for 3 hours made her skin crawl. Ronan seemed to read her expression. You should go back to the house, get some rest. Ruth and I can watch them. I'm not leaving. Alara, I said I'm not leaving. She met his eyes, daring him to argue. I came here to find out what happened to my sister. I'm not walking away before this is finished. Ronan studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right. Then we wait together. They settled into an uneasy vigil. Ruth made coffee on Harlan's stove, had to clear debris off it first, but she managed, and they took turns watching the prisoners while the night slowly bled toward dawn. Alara found herself staring at Jack, trying to reconcile the man who'd smiled and joked and helped around the ranch with the man who'd killed her sister in cold blood. He didn't look like a monster, looked like anyone else. That was the terrible thing about evil, she realized. It didn't announce itself with horns and fangs. It wore a familiar face and shook your hand and stabbed you in the back when you weren't looking. Why'd you do it? She asked finally, voice quiet enough that the others might not hear. Really? Not the ranch, not the money. Why'd you kill her? Jack looked up, met her eyes. For a moment she thought he might not answer. Then he shrugged, small and almost helpless. Because I could. Because she was there and I was angry and I knew I'd get away with it. There's no big reason, no master plan. He stopped, jaw working. I just wanted to hurt something. And she was convenient. The honesty of it was somehow worse than any lie could have been. Alara felt sick. I hope you rot, she said softly. I hope whatever they do to you, it hurts. And I hope you remember her face every single day for the rest of your miserable life. I already do. Jack's voice was flat, empty. You think I don't see her when I close my eyes? You think I don't hear her begging me to stop? I've been living with it for 3 years. Death might actually be a mercy. Then I hope they don't give you that mercy. Jack smiled, bitter and broken. Yeah, me too. The hours crawled past. Ruth dozed in a chair, starting awake every few minutes to check on the prisoners. Ronan stood by the window, watching the sky slowly lighten from black to gray to the pale gold of early morning. Alara sat with the gun in her lap, finger never far from the trigger, watching Jack and Harlan like they might vanish if she blinked. Finally, when the sun was just starting to paint the horizon in shades of pink and orange, Ronan spoke. It's time. They hauled the prisoners to their feet, checked the ropes one more time. Jack moved easily, almost cheerfully, like this was all some grand adventure. Harlan stumbled, had to be steadied by Ruth, looked like he'd aged 20 years overnight. The walk to town took 2 hours. They moved in a strange procession, Ronan in front with his rifle, Ruth beside him, Jack and Harlan in the middle with Alara bringing up the rear with the pistol. No one spoke. What was there to say? Ashford Crossing was just waking up when they arrived. A few early risers stopped to stare, eyes wide, mouths falling open at the sight of the town's respected rancher marching 2 bound men down Main Street. Whispers started immediately, spreading faster than wildfire. The jail was exactly as decrepit as Jack had described. A single cell with bars so rusted they flaked orange dust when Ronan pulled the door open. But the lock still worked, barely, and that was enough. "Get in," Ronan ordered. Jack walked in first, casual as anything. Harlan hesitated at the threshold, looking back at Ronan with something like pleading in his eyes. "Ronan, for what it's worth, I am sorry. About all of it. I never meant for things to—" "Get in the cell, Harlan." Ronan's voice was dead. All the life gone from it. "I don't want to hear it." Harlan's shoulders slumped. He stepped into the cell, and Ronan slammed the door shut, turned the key with a grinding screech of metal on metal. "Now what?" Ruth asked. "Now I ride to the telegraph office in Coulson," Ronan said. "Send word to the territorial marshal in Denver. Tell them what happened. Get someone out here who isn't compromised." "That's 2 days' ride there and back," Ilara said. "I know. You're just going to leave them here. What if they escape? What if someone lets them out?" Ronan looked at her, and the exhaustion in his eyes was absolute. "You got a better idea?" She didn't. The nearest law enforcement that might be trustworthy was in Denver, 6 days by train. The telegraph was their fastest option, but it still meant waiting, hoping, trusting that help would come before something went wrong. "I'll stay," Ilara said. "Watch them. Make sure they don't get out." "Ilara, you can't—" "Yes, I can." She checked the pistol, made sure it was loaded. "You ride to Coulson. Ruth goes back to the ranch, keeps things running. I'll stay here with them. If anyone tries anything, I'll handle it." "You don't know how to shoot that thing." "They don't know that." She looked at Jack through the bars. "Do you?" Jack smiled, cold and knowing. "Guess we'll find out." Ronan opened his mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it. "Fine, but you're not doing this alone. I'll have Tom Fletcher come sit with you. He's honest, at least. Used to be a deputy down in Arizona before he retired here. He'll know what to do if things go sideways." "All right." Ruth grabbed Ilara's arm, pulled her aside. "Are you sure about this? You don't owe anyone here anything. You found out what happened to your sister. You could leave right now. Get on that train and never look back." "I could," Ilara agreed, "but I won't. Not until I see this through. Not until I know they're going to pay for what they did." Ruth searched her face, then nodded slowly. "You're braver than I gave you credit for. Or stupider. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference." Ruth pulled her into a quick, fierce hug. "Be careful. Don't trust anyone. And if things go bad, you run. You hear me? You run and you don't look back." "I hear you." Ruth released her, turned to Ronan. "You bring help back, fast as you can. I don't like leaving her here alone." "She won't be alone. Tom will be here within the hour." Ronan looked at Ilara, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Or just shared exhaustion. "Don't do anything stupid while I'm gone." "Same to you." He almost smiled. Almost. Then he was gone, boots kicking up dust as he headed toward the stable to get a horse. Ilara turned back to the cell. Jack and Harlan sat on opposite ends of the narrow bench, as far from each other as the small space allowed. Jack looked relaxed, almost bored. Harlan looked like he wanted to die. "Comfortable?" Ilara asked, pulling up a chair just outside arm's reach of the bars. "Oh, very," Jack said. 5-star accommodations. Really recommend it." "Good. You're going to be here a while." "We'll see." He leaned back against the wall, closed his eyes. "We'll see." Tom Fletcher arrived 20 minutes later, a weathered man in his 60s with sharp eyes and a shotgun that looked well-maintained. He nodded to Ilara, took up a position on the other side of the cell, and didn't say much beyond confirming Ronan had filled him in on the situation. The day dragged on. People came by to gawk, to whisper, to ask questions Ilara didn't answer. The sun climbed higher, heat pressing down until the small jail felt like an oven. Jack slept, or pretended to. Harlan stared at the wall, lips moving in what might have been prayer or might have been nothing at all. Around noon, a man Ilara didn't recognize pushed open the door. He was well-dressed, expensive coat and polished boots, face smooth and unremarkable. He looked at the prisoners, then at Ilara and Tom. "I'm looking for Harlan Pike," he said, voice cultured and calm. "I understand he's being detained here." "He is," Tom said, not moving from his position. "And he's staying that way until the marshal gets here from Denver." "I see." The man smiled, pleasant and empty. "I'm Mr. Harlan's attorney. I'd like to speak with my client privately." No private conversations, Alara said immediately. Anything you have to say, you say it where we can hear. That's highly irregular. So is murder. Alara stood up, hand drifting toward the pistol at her hip. Who sent you? I'm afraid that's confidential. Then you can leave. Confidentially. The man's smile tightened. He looked at Harlan through the bars. Mr. Pike, I would advise you not to speak to anyone without legal representation present. Anything you say can and will be used against you. I'm going to tell them everything, Harlan said quietly, not looking up. Every name, every payment, every dirty deal. I'm done protecting people who don't deserve it. The man's expression went cold. That would be very unwise. There are people who've invested considerable resources into keeping certain information quiet. They wouldn't appreciate. Is that a threat? Tom raised the shotgun, not quite pointing it at the man, but close enough. Because if it is, you can join them in that cell. Not a threat, simply advice. The man backed toward the door, hands raised in a placating gesture. But I hope Mr. Pike understands the consequences of his choices. And I hope the rest of you understand that sometimes the truth is more dangerous than lies. He left, door swinging shut behind him. Alara and Tom looked at each other. That was, Alara started. A warning, Tom finished. Someone knows what's happening here, and they're not happy about it. Jack opened his eyes, grinned. Told you this was bigger than you thought. You really think one marshal from Denver is going to change anything? You think people are just going to let you tear down everything they've built? This ranch, this town, this whole territory, it's rotten all the way through. You're not exposing a crime. You're pulling on a thread that's going to unravel everything. Good, Alara said. Let it unravel. Let all of it come crashing down. Be careful what you wish for. Jack closed his eyes again. People who threaten the status quo tend to end up dead. Your sister found that out. You might too. The threat hung in the air long after the well-dressed man left, thick and choking as smoke. Alara sat back down, hand resting on the pistol, trying to ignore the way her pulse hammered in her throat. Tom Fletcher shifted his weight, shotgun cradled in the crook of his arm, eyes on the door like he expected it to burst open at any moment. You thinking what I'm thinking? Tom asked quietly. That we're sitting ducks in here? Yeah. Alara glanced at the cell. Jack was watching them now, that knowing smile playing at the corners of his mouth. How long until Ronan gets back? Coulson's a hard day's ride. He won't make it there before nightfall, even pushing the horse. Earliest we'd see him is tomorrow afternoon, and that's if everything goes smooth. Nothing's gone smooth so far. No. Tom's jaw tightened. No, it hasn't. The afternoon wore on. More people came by, drawn by gossip and curiosity, but Tom turned them all away with a gruffness that didn't invite argument. Around 3 o'clock, a kid showed up with food from the general store. Bread, cheese, some dried meat, and Alara realized with a start that she hadn't eaten since yesterday. Her stomach felt like it had been tied in knots, but she forced herself to eat anyway. She'd need the strength. She passed some food through the bars to Harlan and Jack. Harlan took it with trembling hands, barely touched it. Jack ate slowly, deliberately, eyes never leaving Alara's face. You really think you're going to win this? He asked, around a mouthful of bread. I already won. You're in a cell. Sarah's going to get justice. Justice? Jack laughed. That what you call it? Locking up 2 men while the people who actually run things walk free? You got me and Harlan. Good for you. But what about the investors he mentioned? The officials he bribed? The marshal who's been taking money for years? You think they're just going to let you expose them? I think they're going to try to stop me, and I think they're going to fail. That's what Sarah thought, too. The words hit like a fist. Alara's hand tightened on the pistol, and for a moment she genuinely considered shooting him right there, just putting a bullet between those cold eyes and being done with it. Tom must have seen something in her face because he cleared his throat, drew her attention. Don't. He's trying to get under your skin. That's all he's got left. Alara took a slow breath, forced her fingers to relax on the gun. I know. But Jack wasn't done. She was brave, your sister. Stupid, but brave. When I found her in that paddock, she didn't run, didn't scream. Just stood there and looked at me like she was disappointed, like I'd let her down. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You know what her last words were? Shut up, Alara said, voice shaking. She said, "Someone will come looking for me. Someone will find out." Jack's smile widened. "And she was right. You did come. You did find out. But it didn't change anything, did it? I'm still here. The ranch is still rotting, and pretty soon you're going to be right where she ended up." Alara stood up so fast her chair fell backward. She was across the space in 3 steps, gun pressed against the bars, aimed directly at Jack's head. "Say one more word about my sister. I dare you." Jack didn't flinch, just kept smiling that terrible smile. "Do it. Pull that trigger. See if it makes you feel better." Her finger was on the trigger. 1 pull. That's all it would take. 1 pull, and Jack would be dead, and Sarah would be what? Still dead. Still gone. Still buried in a grave Alara had never even seen. She lowered the gun, stepped back, breathing hard. "You're not worth it." "Maybe not, but at least I'm honest about what I am." Jack settled back against the wall. "Can you say the same?" Tom grabbed Alara's arm, pulled her away from the cell. "Outside. Now." She let him guide her out into the late afternoon sun, the heat hitting her like a wall after the dim stuffiness of the jail. Tom closed the door behind them, kept his voice low. "You can't let him bait you like that. That's what he wants. He gets you angry enough, you make a mistake, and then he's got an opening." "I know, Alara rubbed a hand over her face. "Every time he talks about her, every time he smiles like this is all some kind of joke, I want to—" "I know." Tom's expression softened, just slightly. "Lost my daughter a few years back. Different circumstances, but the rage is the same. That wanting to hurt someone, make them pay, make them feel even a fraction of what you're feeling. But that rage, it'll eat you alive if you let it, and it'll make you sloppy. Can't afford sloppy right now." Alara nodded, swallowing hard. How did you get past it, the rage?" "I didn't, just learned to live with it. Some days are better than others." He looked back at the jail. "But I'll tell you this. You want to honor your sister, you do it by staying alive, by seeing this through, by making sure the truth gets told, even if it's ugly. That's what she'd want." "You didn't know her." "No, but I knew girls like her. Knew people who tried to do right in a world that punished them for it. And the best revenge? It's not putting a bullet in the people who hurt them. It's making sure they didn't die for nothing." Alara let out a long breath, felt some of the tension drain from her shoulders. "You're right. I know you're right. Course I'm right. I'm old. Comes with the territory." Tom checked the street, eyes scanning for threats. "Come on, let's get back inside before someone gets any ideas." They went back into the jail. Jack had his eyes closed again, but Alara could tell he wasn't sleeping. Harlan was curled up on the bench, knees pulled to his chest, looking smaller and older than ever. "Harlan?" Alara said. "That lawyer who came by. Who was he really?" Harlan didn't open his eyes. "I don't know. Never seen him before." "But you know who sent him?" "I can guess. There are investors. People who put money into the ranch when we started having trouble. They did it quietly, through intermediaries. I never met most of them, but they made it clear that discretion was part of the deal. If word got out about the ranch's financial situation, they'd lose their investment. They don't like losing." "How much money are we talking about?" "Tens of thousands, maybe more. I lost track after a while." Harlan finally looked at her. "These aren't small-time players, Alara. These are people with connections, with power. They can make problems disappear, make people disappear. Let them try." But even as she said it, Alara felt a chill run down her spine. She'd come here expecting to find one man, maybe 2, responsible for Sarah's death. Instead, she'd uncovered a web of corruption that stretched far beyond this dying town. The sun started to set, painting the sky in shades of fire and ash. Tom lit a lamp, the flickering light casting strange shadows across the cell. Outside, Ashford Crossing settled into its evening rhythms. Saloon piano music drifted on the wind, along with laughter and voices raised in argument or song. Around 10 o'clock, Tom stood up, stretched. "I need to make rounds, check on some things. You going to be all right here for 20 minutes? Alara wanted to say no, wanted to insist he stay. But she could hear the weariness in his voice, see the way he favored his left leg. He'd been standing guard all day without complaint. 20 minutes wouldn't kill her. I'll be fine. Go. Tom hesitated, then nodded. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me. I'll knock 3 times, pause, then twice more. That's how you'll know it's me. 3 times, pause, twice more. Got it. He left, and Alara locked the door like he'd instructed. The click of the bolt sliding home felt both reassuring and terrifying. She was alone now. Just her and 2 prisoners in a jail that could barely keep out the wind, let alone determined attackers. She sat back down, pistol in her lap, and waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. The saloon music got louder, more raucous. Someone shouted, then laughed. Normal night sounds in a frontier town. Then the music stopped. Alara sat up straighter, every nerve suddenly screaming danger. The silence was wrong, too abrupt, too complete. Jack opened his eyes. You feel that? Feel what? Something's coming. He stood up, moved to the bars. Something bad. Harlan was awake too now, pressed against the back wall of the cell, eyes wide with fear. They're here. The investors. The door exploded inward, lock shattering, wood splintering. Alara was on her feet in an instant, gun raised, but there were too many of them. 5 men poured through the doorway, faces covered with bandanas, guns drawn. Drop it, the lead man ordered, voice muffled by the cloth. Alara's mind raced. She could fire, maybe take down 1 or 2, but the others would kill her before she could reload. Or she could drop the gun, buy time, hope Tom came back before things went completely wrong. She dropped the gun. Smart girl. The leader kicked it away, gestured to his men. Get the prisoners. 2 of them moved to the cell, produced a key. How did they have a key? And unlocked the door. They grabbed Harlan first, hauled him out roughly. He didn't resist, just went limp, sobbing. Jack came out on his own, hands still bound, that smile back on his face. Took you long enough. The leader backhanded him across the face, hard enough to split his lip. Shut up. You're coming with us too. Wait, what? We had a deal. Deal's changed. You're a liability now. Should have kept your mouth shut about the girl. The leader looked at Alara. All of you are liabilities, but we're going to fix that. Alara's blood went cold. You're going to kill us. Nothing personal, just business. Can't have you talking to the marshal. Can't have you spreading stories about debts and bribes. Easier to clean everything up. Start fresh. People know we're here. Tom Fletcher, Ronan Creed. They'll come looking. Fletcher's taking a nap in the general store. Won't wake up for hours. And Creed? The leader shrugged. Long way to Coulson. A lot of things can happen on the road. Maybe he makes it. Maybe he doesn't. Either way, by the time anyone comes looking, you'll all be gone. They grabbed Alara, zip-tied her hands in front of her before she could fight back. She tried anyway, kicking, twisting, but there were too many of them, and they were too strong. Within seconds, she was bound and being dragged toward the door. Wait, she gasped. Just tell me one thing. Who are you working for? Who sent you? The leader paused, looked back at her. In the lamplight, she could see his eyes, cold and flat. Someone who doesn't like loose ends. That's all you need to know. They pulled her outside into chaos. The street was empty, everyone driven inside by the sounds of breaking wood and shouting. Or maybe everyone was just smart enough to know when to look the other way. 3 horses waited in the shadows. They threw Harlan over one, Jack over another, started to lift Alara onto the third. That's when she heard it. A sound like thunder, like the earth itself splitting open. And then fire bloomed in the night sky. The ranch. Someone had set fire to the ranch. Alara's heart stopped. Ruth was there. The ranch hands. Nightlash. No, she breathed. No, no, no! Move! The leader snapped. But his men were staring at the horizon too, at the flames that were already visible even from here, miles away. In that moment of distraction, Alara made her choice. She threw herself backward, hit the ground hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs, rolled under the nearest horse. The animal spooked, reared, and suddenly everything was chaos. Men shouting, horses screaming, Alara scrambling to her feet with hands still bound, running blind into the darkness. She heard gunshots behind her, felt something whip past her head close enough to feel the heat of it. But she didn't stop, couldn't stop. She ran toward the fire, toward the ranch, toward the only thing in this godforsaken place that mattered anymore. The journey that had taken 2 hours at a walk took her 40 minutes at a dead run. Her lungs burned, legs screaming in protest, zip ties cutting into her wrists with every movement. But she pushed through the pain, through the exhaustion, through the voice in her head that said this was suicide. By the time she reached the ranch, the main house was fully engulfed. Flames licked at the sky, bright enough to turn night into day, hot enough that she could feel it from 100 yards away. The barn was burning too, and one of the outbuildings, smoke billowing thick and black. Ranch hands ran everywhere, forming bucket lines from the well, throwing water that evaporated before it even reached the flames. It was useless. The fire was too big, too hot, too far gone. Alara stumbled into the chaos, looking for Ruth, for anyone who might tell her what happened. She found one of the younger hands, couldn't remember his name, face streaked with soot. "Where's Ruth?" she shouted over the roar of the fire. "Got out. She's over there, by the water trough." He pointed, then ran back to the bucket line. Alara found Ruth kneeling by the trough, coughing so hard her whole body shook. Someone had thrown a blanket over her shoulders. When she saw Alara, her eyes went wide. "What are you? You're supposed to be in town." "They came for us. Men with guns. I got away." Alara held up her bound hands. "Someone set this fire. Was it them?" "I don't know. I was sleeping, and then there was smoke. And by the time I got out, half the house was already—" Ruth broke into another coughing fit. Alara looked around frantically. "Where's Nightlash? The horses?" "We got most of them out, but Nightlash—" Ruth's voice cracked. "He's still in the paddock, won't come near anyone, and the fire's getting close. We can't—" Alara was already running. The paddock was on the far side of the property, away from the main fire, but embers were falling like rain and the dry grass was catching. Smoke made it hard to see, harder to breathe. Through the haze, she could make out Nightlash's form, pacing frantically along the fence line, trapped between the fire and the fence he wouldn't jump. The gate was locked. Of course it was locked. Alara looked around for something to break it with, couldn't find anything. The fire was getting closer, flames chewing through the grass with terrible speed. She grabbed the fence, tried to climb it with hands still bound, slipped, tried again. Made it over on the third attempt, hit the ground on the other side hard enough to jar her teeth. Nightlash saw her and screamed, a sound of pure terror. He charged toward her, and for a moment Alara thought he was going to trample her. But he veered off at the last second, ran to the opposite corner. "Easy," Alara said, voice hoarse from smoke. "Easy, boy. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to get you out." The horse's eyes were rolling white, foam flecking his mouth. He was beyond reason, beyond anything but pure animal panic. Alara understood that panic, felt it in her own chest, clawing at her throat, screaming at her to run. But she'd spent days sitting with this animal, days earning his trust, inch by painful inch, days teaching him that not everyone was a threat. She started humming. The same melody she'd been using, her mother's song, barely audible over the roar of the flames. She didn't move toward him, just stood there, hands bound, covered in soot and sweat and blood from where the zip ties had cut her wrists, humming like this was any other day. Nightlash stopped pacing. His ears swiveled toward her. "That's right," Alara said softly. "Remember me? Remember the girl who just sits? I'm still just sitting, just being. And I need you to trust me. Just this once." The fire was close enough now that she could feel the heat on her back. Embers landed in her hair, on her dress. The smoke was so thick she could barely see Nightlash anymore. But she kept humming. And slowly, impossibly, Nightlash took a step toward her. Then another. Then he was right there, close enough to touch, trembling like a leaf, but not running. "Good boy," Alara whispered. "Good, brave boy. Now we're going to walk out of here together, nice and slow. Can you do that?" She turned her back on him, the ultimate show of trust, and started walking toward the gate. Behind her she heard hoofbeats, felt hot breath on her neck. Nightlash was following her. The gate was still locked. Alara grabbed the top rail, tried to climb it again, but with Nightlash right behind her and the smoke in her bound hands, she couldn't manage it. She was going to die here. They both were. Then hands were grabbing her, lifting her over. "Ronan, Somehow Ronan was here, face black with soot, eyes wild. "What the hell are you doing?" he shouted. "Saving him!" Alara landed on the other side of the fence, turned back. "Get him out!" But Nightlash was already moving. The horse saw the open space where Alara had gone, saw the fire closing in behind him, and made a choice. He charged the fence. For a moment, Alara thought he'd crash right through it, thought they'd have to pull him from the wreckage. But at the last second, Nightlash gathered himself and jumped. He cleared the fence by inches, landed hard on the other side, stumbled, but didn't fall. Then he was running, flat out, away from the fire and into the darkness beyond. Ronan grabbed Alara's arm, started pulling her away from the paddock. "We need to move, now! You're supposed to be in Coulson. Horse threw a shoe 10 miles out, had to turn back, got here just in time to see the whole place go up." He was dragging her now toward the well where the others had gathered. "What happened in town? Where are the prisoners?" "Gone. Men came, broke into the jail, took them. I think—" Alara coughed, lungs burning. "I think they're going to kill them. Kill all of us. They didn't want witnesses." Ronan's jaw tightened, but he didn't stop moving. They reached the well and he pulled out a knife, cut through her zip ties. Alara's hands were raw and bleeding where the plastic had cut into her skin. Ruth was still by the trough, directing the bucket line even though it was clear the house was lost. When she saw Ronan, relief flooded her face. Thank everything you're back. It's bad. It's all bad." "I can see that." Ronan looked at the burning buildings, at the ranch hands fighting a losing battle, at the smoke that was visible for miles in every direction. "Anyone hurt?" "Don't think so. We got everyone out, but the house, the barn, everything's gone. Buildings can be rebuilt." Ronan's voice was steady, but Alara could hear the strain underneath. This was his legacy burning. His father's ranch, his life's work, everything he'd been trying to save, going up in flames. "Right now, we need to make sure no one else gets hurt. Pull everyone back. Let it burn." "Ronan, let it burn, Ruth. It's over." Ruth stared at him for a moment, then nodded. She started calling orders, pulling the ranch hands back from the flames. They gathered in a loose group near the water trough, watching helplessly as everything burned. Alara found herself standing next to Ronan, both of them staring at the destruction. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "This is my fault. I brought this here. If I'd just left things alone, then your sister's killer would still be walking free, and I'd still be living a lie, thinking my father was an honest man, thinking this ranch was built on anything but blood and bribes." Ronan's voice was rough. This needed to happen. Maybe not like this, but it needed to happen. That doesn't make it hurt less. No, it doesn't. They stood in silence, watching the fire consume everything. The main house collapsed with a groan of timber and a shower of sparks. The barn followed shortly after. By dawn, there'd be nothing left but ash and charred wood and memories. A shout went up from one of the ranch hands. Alara turned to see riders approaching, maybe a dozen of them, coming fast. Her hand went to her hip, looking for the gun that wasn't there anymore. Ronan saw them too, tensed. "Everyone behind me, now!" But as the riders got closer, Alara recognized the man in the lead. Tom Fletcher, very much awake, shotgun across his lap, and behind him. "Is that the marshal?" Ruth squinted into the darkness. "The real marshal from Denver." It was. A tall man with a silver star pinned to his vest, flanked by deputies. They pulled up in a cloud of dust, and Tom dismounted quickly. "Sorry I'm late. When I woke up and saw the jail busted open, I rode straight out to contact the marshal's office. Figured things were about to go sideways." He looked at the burning ranch, jaw dropping. "Guess I was right." The marshal dismounted more slowly, surveying the scene with sharp eyes. "Someone want to tell me what the hell is going on here?" Ronan stepped forward. "That's a long story, Marshal. And it doesn't have a happy ending." "Most don't." The marshal looked at Alara, taking in her torn dress, her bleeding wrists, the soot that covered her from head to toe. "You all right, miss?" "No, but I'm alive." She met his eyes. "My name is Alara Thorne. 3 years ago, my sister was murdered on this ranch. The man who killed her was in your Ashford Crossing jail, along with his accomplice. About 3 hours ago, men broke them out. I think they're planning to kill them to keep them quiet. The marshal absorbed this. You got proof of any of this? I have a ledger. Had a ledger. It was in the jail. Alara's stomach dropped. In all the chaos, she'd forgotten about the evidence. If they took that, they didn't. Tom pulled something from his saddlebag, handed it to the marshal. I grabbed it before I left. Figured it might be important. Alara could have kissed him. The marshal opened the ledger, started flipping through pages, expression growing darker with each entry. This implicates a lot of people. Important people. He looked up. You understand what you're starting here? What kind of mess this is going to make? I understand my sister deserves justice, Alara said, and I understand I'm not leaving until she gets it. The marshal studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right, we're going to need statements from all of you. Everything you know, everyone involved, every dirty deal and backroom payment. This is going to take time. We've got time, Ronan said, looking at the ruins of his ranch. Not like we're going anywhere. The marshal started organizing his deputies, sending them to search for the prisoners, to secure the town, to start gathering evidence. Tom stayed close to Alara, making sure she got water, got her wrists cleaned and bandaged, got a blanket against the chill of early morning. Ruth appeared with coffee from somewhere, strong and bitter and exactly what Alara needed. They sat together near the water trough, watching the fire burn itself out, watching the first light of dawn paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. You think they'll find them? Ruth asked quietly. Jack and Harlan? I don't know. Alara sipped the coffee, felt it burn all the way down. Part of me hopes they do. Part of me hopes they're already dead. Is that terrible? No, it's human. Ruth patted her hand. You've been through hell, girl. You're entitled to some dark thoughts. I just wanted the truth. I just wanted to know what happened to Sarah. And now you do. Question is, what are you going to do with it? Alara looked at the ruins of the ranch, at Ronan talking quietly with the marshal, at the ranch hands huddled together, trying to make sense of everything. I'm going to make sure it meant something. Sarah's death, this fire, all of it. I'm going to make sure the truth comes out, all of it. Even if it destroys what's left. Especially then, Ruth smiled, sad and proud. Your sister would be proud of you. My sister would tell me I'm an idiot for staying, that I should run while I still can. Maybe, but she stayed too, didn't she? Even when it was dangerous, even when she knew what it might cost. Ruth squeezed her hand. Some things are worth the risk. The sun kept rising, burning away the smoke, revealing the full extent of the damage. The main house was gone. The barn was gone. Most of the outbuildings were nothing but ash, but the land was still there. The paddocks, the fences, the water sources, the bones of something that could be rebuilt. And in the distance, silhouetted against the dawn sky, Alara saw a familiar shape. Nightlash, standing on a hill, watching them. He'd stopped running, stopped panicking, just stood there, wild and free and alive. Alara stood up, walked a few steps toward him. The horse didn't run, didn't even move, just watched her with those dark, intelligent eyes. See, Ruth said from behind her, you did it. You tamed him. No. Alara shook her head. I just showed him he didn't have to be afraid anymore. That's not the same thing. Isn't it? Maybe it was. Maybe that's all any of them could do. Show each other that fear didn't have to be the end of the story. That trust was possible, even after betrayal. That something broken could still choose to be whole. The marshal's voice cut through her thoughts. Miss Thorne, we need your statement. Alara took one last look at Nightlash, then turned back toward the ruins and the badge and the truth that was going to tear everything apart. I'm ready, she said, and meant it. Alara spent 3 hours telling the marshal everything, every detail, every conversation, every piece of evidence she'd found. Her voice went hoarse halfway through, but she kept talking, kept explaining, kept reliving the worst moments until they felt carved into her bones. The marshal took notes in a neat, methodical hand, stopping her occasionally to clarify details or ask follow-up questions. He was good at his job, Alara realized. Patient, thorough, not easily shocked. When she finished describing Jack's confession about killing Sarah, his expression didn't change. He just wrote it down and moved on to the next question. By the time they were done, the sun was fully up and the fire had burned down to smoldering embers. The marshal closed his notebook, looked at her with something that might have been sympathy. "That's quite a story, Miss Thorne." "It's not a story. It's what happened." "I believe you. Question is whether a jury will." He tucked the notebook into his jacket. "We've got the ledger, we've got your testimony, we've got Ronan Creed backing you up. But without Jack or Harlan, without physical evidence of the murder itself, it's going to be hard to build a case that'll stick." "So you're saying they get away with it? Sarah's killer just walks?" "I'm saying the law moves slow. And sometimes people slip through the cracks." The marshal stood, stretched. "But I'll tell you this. The ledger alone is enough to start an investigation that's going to shake this territory down to its foundation. Those names in there? They're going to have to answer some hard questions, and some of them are going to crack. When they do, we'll get more evidence, more testimony, more pieces of the puzzle." "How long will that take?" "Months. Maybe years." He saw her expression and shook his head. "I know it's not what you want to hear, but that's how justice works. It's slow and messy, and it doesn't care about how bad we want closure." Alara wanted to argue, wanted to demand he do something right now, but she was too tired, too wrung out. She just nodded, accepted it, let Tom help her to her feet. Ronan was waiting outside the makeshift tent the marshal had set up. He looked worse than she felt, face gaunt, eyes hollow, shoulders hunched like he was carrying weight that might break him. When he saw her, he straightened slightly. "You all right?" "No, you?" "No." He looked past her at the ruins of his home. "They found something, in what's left of the barn. You should come see." Alara followed him across the property, past ranch hands sifting through debris, past the marshal's deputies searching for evidence. The barn was just a skeleton now, blackened support beams reaching toward the sky like broken fingers. One of the deputies was kneeling near what had been the back corner, carefully moving aside charred wood. As Alara got closer, she saw what he'd found: a body. Badly burned, barely recognizable as human, but definitely a body. "We think it's Harlan," the deputy said, not looking up. Found his pocket watch near the remains, engraved with his initials. Alara stared at the corpse, trying to feel something. Satisfaction, maybe. Or relief that at least one of Sarah's killers had faced justice, even if it came from fire instead of law. But all she felt was empty. "What about Jack?" she asked. "No sign of him yet. We're still looking." Of course Jack had escaped. Men like him always did. They slipped away while everyone else burned, disappeared into the next town with a new name and a clean slate, leaving destruction in their wake. "We'll find him," the marshal said from behind her. "Might take time, but we'll find him. Men like that can't help themselves. They'll make a mistake eventually." "Eventually," Alara repeated. The word tasted bitter. Ronan touched her shoulder gently. "Come on. Nothing more to see here." They walked back toward the water trough where Ruth had set up a makeshift camp. Someone had brought supplies from town: blankets, food, medical supplies. The ranch hands were scattered around in small groups, some sleeping, some just staring at nothing. "What happens now?" Alara asked. "To the ranch. To all of you." Ronan was quiet for a long time. "I don't know. The house is gone. Most of the equipment, the barn. Even if I had the money to rebuild, which I don't, since apparently the accounts are empty and the ranch is mortgaged to hell, I'm not sure I'd want to. This place is poisoned, built on lies and blood and crimes I didn't even know about." "Your father's crimes aren't yours." "Aren't they?" He looked at her, and the pain in his eyes was raw. "I spent my whole life trying to live up to his legacy, trying to be the kind of man he was. Turns out he was a thief and a fraud. What does that make me?" "Someone who didn't know, someone who tried to do right with what you had." "I should have known, should have asked more questions, paid more attention, seen the signs." He rubbed a hand over his face. "Ruth tried to tell me years ago that something was off with the books, that Harlan was making decisions without consulting me. I told her to stay out of ranch business. I trusted him, trusted my father's judgment in hiring him, and people died because of it." Alara understood that guilt, carried enough of her own to recognize it in others. You can't save people from things you don't know are happening. That's not how it works. Then how does it work? You do better when you do know. You make different choices. You don't make the same mistakes twice. She looked at the ruins, at the ranch hands who'd lost their jobs, at Ruth who'd lost her home. You figure out what matters and you protect it. That's all anyone can do. Ronan absorbed this, jaw working. What matters to you? Now that you've got your answers, now that you know what happened to Sarah, what are you going to do? It was a fair question. Elara had spent 3 years hunting for truth, driven by grief and rage, and the need to make someone pay. Now she had the truth. Had most of it, anyway. And it felt nothing like she'd expected. I don't know, she admitted. I thought finding out would fix something, would make her death mean something. But it doesn't. She's still gone. The people who hurt her are still out there mostly. And I'm still just... Her voice broke. I'm still just angry and sad and lost. You're also alive, Ruth said, appearing with coffee that smelled like heaven. Which is more than a lot of people can say after going through what you went through. And you got further than anyone else did in exposing what was really happening here. That counts for something. Does it? It does to the people whose names are in that ledger, the ones who got paid off and ran. Now they know someone cared enough to dig. Someone cared enough to risk everything for the truth. Ruth pressed the coffee into Elara's hands. Your sister would be proud of you. Elara wanted to believe that. Wanted to think that somewhere, somehow, Sarah knew what she'd done. But she'd never been good at comforting lies. Sarah was dead, buried in a grave Elara still hadn't visited. Whatever pride or peace she might have felt was gone with her. The next few days passed in a blur. The marshal's investigation expanded, deputies riding out to interview people named in the ledger, bringing some back in chains, watching others flee. The well-dressed lawyer who'd threatened them at the jail turned out to be a frontman for a cattle syndicate that had been using the ranch to launder money. He was arrested trying to board a train to San Francisco. More bodies turned up. Not literally, though they did find Jack's hat near the river, blood-stained and abandoned, but figuratively. Politicians who'd taken bribes. Land speculators who'd been paying Harlan to ignore property disputes. Even the previous territorial marshal, the one who'd called Sarah's death an accident, was implicated in the cover-up. It was bigger than Elara had imagined, bigger than Sarah, bigger than one ranch and one dying town. It was a whole system of corruption, and pulling on one thread had unraveled all of it. She should have felt vindicated, should have felt like she'd accomplished something. Instead, she just felt tired. A week after the fire, Elara walked out to the old paddock where Sarah had died. Someone had cleaned it up. The broken fence posts had been replaced, the ground raked smooth. It looked almost peaceful now, like nothing bad had ever happened there. Elara stood in the center of it, trying to feel her sister's presence, trying to sense some kind of connection to the place where Sarah had taken her last breath. But there was nothing, just dirt and wind and the distant sound of hammers as ranch hands started rebuilding the barn. I'm sorry, she said to the empty air. I'm sorry I wasn't here. I'm sorry I couldn't save you. I'm sorry finding out what happened doesn't make it hurt less. The wind picked up, carrying dust and the smell of charred wood. No answers, no absolution, just silence. Footsteps behind her made her turn. Ronan approached slowly, hands in his pockets, looking uncertain in a way she'd never seen before. Thought I might find you here, he said. Seemed right, coming to the place where it all started. Or ended, depending on how you look at it. He stopped a few feet away, giving her space. I've been thinking about what you said, about doing better when you know better. Yeah? The ranch is finished. Even if I could rebuild, even if I could get past what my father did, what Harlan did, it's over. The creditors are going to seize the land, sell it off piece by piece to cover the debts. He looked around the paddock, at the hills beyond. I could fight it, could try to hold on, but I don't think I want to anymore. Some things need to die so new things can grow. Elara understood that better than he knew. What will you do? Start over, somewhere else, somewhere that isn't haunted by ghosts and lies. He looked at her directly. I'm leaving next week. Taking whatever money I can scrape together and heading west. California, maybe, or Oregon, somewhere with water and trees and land that hasn't been bled dry. That sounds good. I hope it works out for you. Come with me. The words hung between them, heavy with possibility. Elara stared at him, not sure she'd heard right. What? Come with me, Ronan repeated. I'm not asking you to be my wife or my property or anything like that. I'm asking you to be my partner. Help me build something new, something honest, something that isn't rotting from the inside out. Ronan, I know you came here for Sarah. I know you were planning to leave as soon as you got your answers, but maybe... He stopped, choosing words carefully. Maybe there's more here than just answers. Maybe there's a chance to start over too. Both of us. Leave the ghost behind and build something that actually matters. Alara wanted to say no, wanted to stick to her plan, get on the train, disappear into the next town, keep moving until the grief stopped chasing her. That's what she'd been doing for 3 years. That's what she knew. But the thought of going back to that life, back to the endless running and hiding and searching for something that would never be enough, it made her chest ache. I don't know if I can, she said honestly. I don't know if I'm capable of building anything. All I know how to do is tear things down. That's not true. You tamed Nightlash. You got him to trust you when everyone else had given up on him. I didn't tame him. I just showed him he didn't have to be afraid all the time. Exactly. Ronan stepped closer. And maybe that's what we both need. Someone to show us we don't have to keep fighting everything. That trust is possible. That starting over doesn't mean forgetting what came before. It just means not letting it define everything that comes after. Alara looked at this man who'd lost everything, who'd had his entire world torn apart and still somehow found the strength to keep standing, who was offering her not a rescue, not a solution, but a partnership, a choice. I'll think about it, she said finally. That's the best I can do right now. I'll think about it. Ronan nodded, something like relief crossing his face. That's all I'm asking. He left her alone in the paddock, and Alara stayed there until the sun started to set, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. 2 days later, the marshal came to see her. They'd found Jack. Or rather, Jack had found them. He'd walked into a sheriff's office 3 towns over, turned himself in, confessed to killing Sarah and half a dozen other crimes besides. The sheriff had telegraphed ahead, and now Jack was being transported back to Denver to stand trial. Why? Alara asked, not understanding. Why would he turn himself in? Guilt, maybe. Fear. Running out of places to run. The marshal shrugged. Does it matter? He's confessed. We've got him. He'll hang for what he did. It should have felt like victory, like closure. But all Alara felt was hollow. She went to see Jack before they transported him. He was being held in the rebuilt jail cell, same bars, same bench, different prisoner. When he saw her, he didn't smile, didn't mock, just looked tired. Came to gloat? He asked. Came to understand. Alara stayed outside the bars, arms crossed. Why'd you do it? Turn yourself in, I mean. Jack was quiet for a long time. You ever carry something so heavy you forget what it feels like to not carry it? That's what your sister became. Every night I closed my eyes, I saw her. Every time I looked in a mirror, I saw what I'd become. Running just made it worse, made the weight heavier. So you confessed. So I confessed. He looked at her properly, and there was something broken in his eyes, something human beneath the monster. Won't bring her back. Won't fix what I did. But at least I'm not pretending anymore. At least the weight is someone else's problem now. That's not how guilt works. It doesn't go away just because you confess. No, but maybe it gets lighter. Maybe that's all we can hope for, that eventually the things we carry get light enough that we can keep walking. He leaned back against the wall. I'm going to hang. I know that. I deserve it. But before I do, I want you to know, your sister didn't suffer. It was quick. She didn't feel much. Alara knew he was lying, knew it with a certainty that went bone deep. But she also knew he was trying in his broken way to offer something, comfort maybe, or redemption. Some small gesture that said he understood the magnitude of what he'd taken. Thank you for telling me, she said, and meant it, despite everything. She left him there, left him to whatever justice awaited, and walked back out into the sunlight feeling lighter than she had in years. The day before Ronan was set to leave, Alara went to find Nightlash. The stallion had been living wild on the edges of the property, coming close enough to watch the rebuilding, but never close enough to touch. She found him standing on the same hill where she'd seen him after the fire, silhouetted against the sky. "Hey there, beautiful," she said softly, stopping 20 feet away. "Remember me?" Nightlash's ears swiveled toward her voice. He didn't run, didn't approach, just watched. Alara sat down in the grass, started humming her mother's song. Minutes passed. The sun moved across the sky. And slowly, impossibly, Nightlash walked down the hill toward her. He stopped 5 feet away, near enough that she could have reached out and touched him if she'd wanted to. But she didn't. Just sat there, humming, being present. Finally, Nightlash took the last steps, lowered his head, and bumped her shoulder gently with his nose. Alara laughed, surprised by the joy that bubbled up in her chest. She raised a hand slowly, let him see it, gave him time to pull away. When he didn't, she touched his neck, felt the warmth of him, the power barely contained beneath that midnight coat. "You did it," she whispered. "You learned to trust again." The horse stood there, tolerating her touch, breathing steady and calm. And Alara realized that if this creature, this animal that had been hurt and broken and taught to fear everything, could find a way to trust again, maybe she could too. She found Ronan in what remained of his study, packing the few books that had survived the fire. He looked up when she entered, and she could see the question in his eyes before he asked it. "I'll come with you," she said, "to California or Oregon or wherever you're going. I'll help you build something new." Relief flooded his face. "Yeah? Yeah, but not as your wife. Not as someone who belongs to you or owes you or fits into some box of what a woman should be. I wouldn't want that anyway. As partners, equal partners, in whatever we build." "Equal partners," Ronan agreed. "I can live with that." They shook hands on it, and Alara felt something settle in her chest. Not peace exactly, not closure, but possibility. The chance to be something other than a girl defined by grief and rage and loss. Ruth cried when Alara told her, but they were happy tears. "You deserve this. Both of you, a fresh start, a real one. Come with us," Alara said impulsively. "We'll need someone to keep us honest, to make sure we don't make the same mistakes." Ruth laughed through her tears. "Someone's got to. You two would burn the place down within a month if left to your own devices." So it was settled. The three of them would head west, along with Tom Fletcher, who'd grown tired of retirement and wanted one more adventure, and half a dozen of the ranch hands who had nowhere else to go. They'd pool their resources, buy land somewhere clean, somewhere with water and hope, and build something that didn't require lies to stand. On Alara's last night in Ashford Crossing, she finally visited Sarah's grave. It was in a small cemetery at the edge of town, marked by a simple wooden cross and her sister's name carved in uncertain letters. Alara knelt in the dirt, traced the letters with her fingers. "I found out what happened to you, found the people responsible. Most of them, anyway. It didn't fix anything. Didn't bring you back. Didn't even make me feel better, not really. But at least you know now, wherever you are. At least someone cared enough to dig." The wind rustled through the grass, carrying the smell of new growth and distant rain. Alara closed her eyes, let herself remember Sarah properly for the first time in 3 years. Not just as a victim, not just as a cause, but as a person. A sister who'd made her laugh, who'd taught her how to braid her hair, who'd left home to make something of herself and paid the ultimate price for trying. "I'm leaving," Alara said. "Starting over somewhere new. I think you'd approve. You always said I needed to stop running from things and start running toward them. Took me a while, but I'm trying now. I'm going to try." She stayed there until the stars came out, until the temperature dropped and her knees ached from kneeling in the dirt. When she finally stood to leave, she felt lighter. Not healed. Healing took time, took work, took more than one conversation with a gravestone. But lighter. Like maybe the weight of carrying Sarah's death didn't have to break her after all. The next morning, they loaded everything they owned into 3 wagons and headed west. Alara sat next to Ronan on the lead wagon, Ruth and Tom following behind, the ranch hands bringing up the rear. Nightlash ran alongside them for the first few miles, wild and free, then veered off toward the horizon with a toss of his magnificent head. "Think we'll see him again?" Ronan asked. "Maybe. Maybe not. He's got his own journey now, his own choices to make." Alara watched the stallion disappear into the distance. "That's how it should be. We're not meant to control everything, just Just be present for the parts that matter. Ronan considered this, then nodded. Wise words. Don't let it go to your head. I'm not always wise. No one is. That's what makes us human. They rode in comfortable silence as the sun climbed higher, as Ashford Crossing disappeared behind them, as the future stretched out ahead full of uncertainty and possibility and the terrifying freedom of choice. Alara thought about Sarah, about Jack facing the gallows, about Harlan's burned body and the investors still being rounded up, and the corruption that would take years to fully untangle. She thought about all the ways the truth had hurt, all the ways it had destroyed, all the ways it had refused to provide the neat, satisfying ending she'd been searching for. But she also thought about Nightlash learning to trust again, about Ronan choosing to let go of a poisoned legacy, about Ruth and Tom and the ranch hands choosing to risk everything for the possibility of something better, about herself, choosing to stop running and start building. The truth hadn't fixed anything, but it had cleared the ground, burned away the lies and the rot and the comfortable deceptions that let evil flourish in the dark. And on that scorched earth, maybe something real could grow, something honest, something worth protecting. You ever think about what comes after? Ronan asked, breaking the silence. After what? After the starting over. After we build our ranch and make our fortune or don't. After all the work is done and we're old and tired and looking back on our lives. You think we'll regret this? Leaving everything behind? Alara thought about it seriously, giving the question the weight it deserved. I think we'll regret the things we didn't do more than the things we did. And I think if we're lucky, if we're smart, if we work hard and treat each other right, maybe we'll look back and realize we built something that mattered. Not because it was perfect, not because it was easy, but because it was ours. Honestly, ours. Ronan smiled, and it transformed his whole face the way it always did, made him look younger, made him look like someone who still believed good things were possible. I can live with that. So can I. The wagons rolled on, carrying them toward a future that was uncertain, but theirs to shape. Behind them, the past burned and bled and demanded to be remembered. Ahead, possibility stretched like the open sky. Alara pulled out the torn letter she'd found in the barn, the one Sarah had written 3 years ago. She read it one last time, then let the wind take it from her fingers. Watched it spiral away into the blue, carrying with it the last piece of evidence that this had ever been about anything but two broken people trying to find their way home. The letter disappeared into the distance, and Alara didn't look back. Just kept her eyes on the horizon, on Ronan beside her, on Ruth and Tom laughing about something behind them, on the ranch hands singing off-key cowboy songs that echoed across the empty land. They were alive. They were free. They were choosing each other and the possibility of something better. That wasn't victory. It wasn't closure. It wasn't the neat, satisfying ending she'd been searching for, but it was enough. For now, it was enough. And sometimes, Alara was learning, enough was all you needed to keep moving forward.